Art can mean different things to different people. For me, it's all about the joy of creativity. So if you draw, paint, write, dance, sing, craft, play air guitar, or even sculpt using nothing more than mashed potatoes, consider yourself an artist and join our conversation. For the next half hour, meet the artist and learn about their inspiration while we all enjoy the beauty of creativity. Welcome to Season 2 of Art Talk with John Cole Artist. Hey, good evening, everyone. It's John Cole Artist, and I want to welcome you all to this very special edition of Art Talk. One of the things I've been wanting to do for quite a while is kind of talk a little bit more about the paranormal. It's not something that typically happens on this particular podcast, and I think the last time we did it was last year for my first annual Halloween special. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about the paranormal and the art of ghost hunting, because it's something that I have done in the past, and I'd like to share some of my experiences with you, talk a little bit about the equipment that I use, the equipment that you could use if you were so inclined to do that. And I'd like to share with you for the first time some video that I took on the USS Hornet, which is an aircraft carrier. It's now a museum that's in Alameda, California, as well as some EVP, some electronic voice phenomena I captured at the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia. And I'm going to close out later on this afternoon or this evening with a very special presentation of a ghost story that was told to me, and I'm going to share that with you. And hi, Christine. Christine's on. So thank you for tuning in. Matter of fact, I think she's right in the room next door. So yeah, thank you. So let's just start this thing off right and just ask the big question. What is a ghost and are they real? Well, I'm going to tell you, I am very familiar with, again, investigating haunted houses and things like that. I'm also familiar with all the television programs, right? Whether or not it's Travel Channel, Discovery Plus, or something like that, right? Going all the way back to the original ghost hunters who were and may still be based out of Warwick, Rhode Island, which is just down the road from here in Dracut. I also was a part of a paranormal investigative team in West Virginia, another Dimension paranormal team. What they did was they investigated places that were purportedly haunted, right? Cemeteries, historical locations, restaurants, things like that, places that had a history of the paranormal. And I can say that having done many of these different things, watched the different television programs, I still don't know what a ghost is. I've never seen a ghost in person. I have captured strange evidence, and again, I'll share some of that with you tonight. But I'm still on the fence on what that is, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because I'm a person that really needs that empirical data to believe something, right? I'll believe it when I see it, or whether or not it's some kind of collective manifestation, right? So those are things that I think are really interesting to talk about. So we'll delve into that a little bit. So let me start by addressing some of the equipment that I've used in the past, and just kind of give you an example of things that I've used in the field before and that I continue to use on those off chances that I do get to investigate. And Christine writes energy. That could very well be, Christine, that ghosts are a form of energy, right? And that's actually something that dovetails nicely in with our equipment here. So let me give you some examples of some of the equipment. The first thing I'm going to show you here, and this is an old camcorder. This is a Sony Handycam. Now, what's special about this? Well, first of all, they don't make these things anymore because these took what's called mini DV cassette tapes. They slid right here in the side, and then of course you would, use your camera and record. And what made these Sony cameras so special is that they came with something called Night Shot. And Night Shot was nice because it has a built-in infrared lens, and the camera is sensitive enough to pick up things in the infrared field or in the infrared spectrum, which means it can take pictures at night, which is really cool. There are cameras today that do that, but the technology has changed somewhat. The problem with the Sony Handycam and why these things are so hard to find, not just because they're tape-based, but because these had a tendency to allow you to look through certain types of fabric. If you use your imagination, you can see why that would be a problem, right? You could take video of people, and you could actually see beneath their clothing. So they did away with the night shot technology itself, and they made some modifications to that. And I think today you have much safer type equipment. But having this older version is kind of nice because it really does shoot some pretty good video at night. And if you get some extra infrared lights, you can definitely get a much further distance if you're recording someplace with larger rooms, like Trans-Allegheny, for example, which is a pretty large location. The drawback right now with this is the batteries. They are very proprietary, and they're very difficult to find. So for this particular camera, if I was going to use this today, I would probably have to look for a location that had electricity so I could plug it in and record. But having a camcorder for video evidence, cell phones, right? Because the first thing we're all going to say is, well, dude, I got a cell phone. Why can't I use that? Well, you can. You absolutely can. I think that the video quality at night on a cell phone, like an iPhone, for example, isn't going to be that great. But for evening shots, right, sunset shots where the sun is still on the horizon, I think you can get good video. The drawback with using a cell phone at all for an investigation, and that goes for any investigation, is the fact that they do put off electromagnetic energy, and that can affect the quality of your evidence that you gather, whether or not it's audio or video. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. Another tool that's extremely handy is a small micro digital recorder. All right, now this one's nice because if you unplug it here, it's got a USB port. You can just slide it in and then go ahead and pull off your MP3 files. But these are really handy to have because they're small, they're portable, they have a very long life, and of course they have a lot of memory. So what I would do is, if I was going to go ghost hunt for 4 or 5 hours, I would just turn this thing on and record and just stick it in my pocket or something and just let it go. And then I could go back in after the fact to listen up. So video or audio recorders are really good. Can you use tape? Absolutely. Matter of fact, downstairs in my kit, I do have a cassette tape recorder, with the old cassettes, and some folks may not know what that is. Okay. But a cassette recorder to record audio. Interesting thing about digital recorders specifically is they are more prone to picking up that electronic voice phenomena. What is that? What is EVP, or electronic voice phenomena? Researchers in the paranormal field feel that EVP is a form of spirit communications. It's where the voices of the dead can come through and record on your recorder. I don't know what that is. Anyway, that was strange. Good to have, but the EVP can record on here. Now, I've always wondered, how does this work when it captures voices? Think about this for a second. This isn't a tape. This isn't something that can be recorded over, because if you're going to use a cassette tape, somebody's going to say, well, the voice that you heard that you ghost, it's because you recorded over an old tape. And you're hearing some of the old stuff coming through. Could be. But how do you explain it on a digital recorder when everything is done using ones and zeros because it's digital? I don't know if anybody's ever given me a really good answer on that. So if you hear something on a digital recorder that's not you, that's not the people that you may or may not be with, it's not the wind, and it's something that if you hear it, it sounds like a voice, you have to ask that question, what did I capture? So digital recorders are important. Also, super important, flashlights. Now, yeah, I know flashlights. You got to be able to see in the dark. Totally get that. But what's nice about this type of flashlight here is that it has the ability to twist to turn the light on. I'm just twisting the barrel a little bit to get the light turned on. And Some folks not only use this for light, but they use it for spirit communications. And so this is a relatively inexpensive way of doing basic spirit communications, is if you turn this so that it just turns off. So that's on. And then you sit this someplace. It's in theory super sensitive. And then if you ask spirits, the spirits can then interact with this and they can touch this and turn it on. Turn it on for yes, turn it off for no, things like that. Matter of fact, the example that we're going to see, I think I put that in there. No, I don't think I did, but there is an example that I have in some of my recordings that show this in action. I don't know whether or not I fully believe in this flashlight method, but it's a very common thing that you do see. But flashlights, if anything, just for safety purposes, have one of them. And then we get into some of the more interesting devices. Probably the one thing that anybody that's watched any ghost story or ghost show has seen is the K2 meter. Now, what is a K2 meter? Well, by turning it on, basically what these things do is they check for electromagnetic interference. So if I were to take this, for example, and put this up against, let's see if I can make it, here we go. I'll show you how this thing works. So here's my telephone, my cell phone. There's me with a zombie. Here's my K2 meter here. Watch when I put these two together. See how it's picking up that? That's picking up the electromagnetic energy from the cell phone. So what you're seeing here is the fundamental problem with using cell phones when you're doing ghost investigations, because cell phones put off electromagnetic interference, which means if you're using something like a K2 meter to pick up ghosts, right? Because again, Christine had written, she believes it's energy, and most paranormal investigators do believe that it's energy. These devices, in theory, can pick that up. Because you see I'm touching it and the light isn't going off. So it's not picking my electromagnetic energy, but it can pick up ghosts. At least that's what people think. But these are very, very common. K2 meter, they're handy to have. Along the same vein, these things are a little less common, but they're a little more sensitive. And this is a EM meter, and it has different settings on here. And there's for magnetic for some, which is electricity. And what's nice about this is these are super, super sensitive. I could bring my hand up here, and this is picking up my electromagnetic field. So again, the theory goes, if you have one of these devices here, you can tell if there's a ghost nearby by watching the meter move and listening for the sound, right? And then, of course, we have something even more advanced, which is what's called the Mel meter, which is this device here. This does something very similar to the tri-field and very similar to the K2 meter, and that is it picks up electromagnetic energy. But what's really cool about this is you'll notice this thing at the top, and if you look on the screen, it says 65.3. This has a built-in thermometer, because some folks also believe that when spirit activity enters a space, the temperature drops, and this is a good way to record that metric. So if I'm sitting here and all of a sudden it gets cold, and I have this empirical evidence now that shows it's going from 65 to 64 to 63 to 62, and the temperature's dropping, that's just another way that another piece of evidence that people can use to explain paranormal activity. So all of these devices are very similar. And then, of course, you've seen this before on my show, and that is the REM pod. Same basic idea as everything else. Okay, it's got lights on the top, and then when a spirit comes nearby, wait, that's interesting. Ooh. That must be me causing that. Notice it's because I'm holding it. If I break that field, well, that's enough to drive you crazy, right? If you break that field, what happens is the electromagnetic energy, conflicts or something with the field that this is putting off, and then it's set up then to make a noise so that you know there's ghosts present. And lastly, the things I'll talk about here before we look at some of the evidence that I've collected. Oh, Christine. Well, here, Christine wrote, what is your favorite device to use and why? Let me show you these last two pieces first, and then I'll answer that question. I've got two things here that are very similar. Let's see if I can show you. Here we go. One's called a spirit box, which is this one here, and one is a Radio Shack radio. So let me start with the Radio Shack radio. What this does is, let me get this thing turned on. Okay, this is just, and for those that don't know, Radio Shack is a company that was around, I think they basically closed up shop in the early 2000s. But Radio Shack sells electronics, and what this is an AM/FM radio. That's all it is. However, what was really cool about this in the ghost field is that there was something called the Radio Shack hack. What is that? Well, you bought one of these discount radios here, and there's a button here that says preset and scan. What would happen in a normal AM or FM radio, and you can see this in your car as well if you have, you know, one of the old school AM/FM radios. You push the button, it'll scan to the next frequency, or it'll keep scanning until you hear something you like. You press the button, it stops. But that's what this allows you to do. The Radio Shack hack, by going inside the electronics here and removing one of the pins, it allows you to scan. Same idea with the spirit box. So people use this when they're investigating as a tool to look for words. The thought is that ghosts can, because they are part of the electromagnetic spectrum and they can affect electronics, can send words through a scanning AM or FM frequency. So for example, if I were to say, is there anybody here with me right now? I would then listen for somebody to see if they would respond. And oops, wrong button. Let me turn this off. There we go. Once I figure out how to turn the thing off. Same thing with the spirit box. This is exactly the same thing. What I'm going to do is I'll turn the power on. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is scan. So this is exactly the same thing as the Radio Shack phone, the Radio Shack radio with the hack. What this one does then is it'll scan at a slightly faster rate on either AM or FM. And I know that a lot of investigators use that. The question is, are they really picking up spirit voices? And I think one of the suggestive ways that it could be spirit voices is when you do an experiment with two people, and I've seen this on Kindred Spirits, I've seen this on a couple other programs. One person will be basically blind and deaf, so they can't hear. Maybe they're wearing sound what do they call that? So sound canceling headphones with something that they can't see. This will be running the spirit box, and then a third party, the second person, would ask questions. And then the person that's blinded and can't hear or just hears this will then speak what they hear. So somebody could ask a question like, "Are you here?" Person over here answered yes. They can't hear each other, they can't see each other, but they're now communicating back and forth. So that's one way that you could use this. The other way is to just play it, let it scan through the AM or FM frequencies, and then sit back and answer or see if the answers jibe with what it is that you're saying. So what is my favorite device to use and why? I think my favorite device will always be the digital recorder, because there's something really interesting about the voice phenomena. That seems to be the most common type of phenomena. From a video or photographic perspective, it's really across the board, and photographs and video are really hard to interpret. I know for the longest time, folks would see or take pictures of orbs, things that they believed were spirits. And then, of course, if you really get into the orb idea, you'll notice that it's not always dust, which is, of course, the immediate go-to. 99% of the time, it probably is dirt in your photograph. Matter of fact, I have some from Trans-Allegheny where you look at it and you're like, oh my heavens, there's ghosts all over the place. And really what it was some kicked up dust. But there are some photographs that does make you wonder. It doesn't look like dust. It doesn't photograph with a reflective nature. Maybe there wasn't a flash at the time, and yet there's something there that looks organic and slightly out of place. Is that a spirit? I don't know. But I think the bigger question when it comes to things like orbs or spirit activity, electronic voice phenomena, and the digital recorders, or anything that you pick up on one of these devices like the Mel meter or the K2 is, where the heck is it coming from? And see, this is where it gets challenging for my brain, because my understanding of electronics, which is very fundamental, is that electricity, for example, will radiate, just like human beings will radiate, right? Cell phones will radiate. So it would be easy to say, well, this is just picking up some kind of radiation. But how do you answer the question, well, I'm in a building with no electricity and this is going off, or I'm in a building with no electricity, I don't have a cell phone and this is going off, right? What is this picking up? Can electricity, electromagnetic energy, be outside of hauntings, ghosts? Let's assume that let's assume they don't exist for a second. Let's assume that there's no such thing. But you have a device like this in a building with no electricity, no cell phone, it's just you and this is going off. Where is that electricity coming from? No idea. So I've got a great example. Here's a video I'm going to show you from the USS Hornet. I think this was, and Christine, you can, I think it was 2014, 15, something like that. I don't remember. When we were stationed in California, I was able to spend a night on the USS Hornet, which is a notoriously haunted ship. It was a ship that saw battle in the Gulf Wars. It saw battle in World War II. Matter of fact, if you ever watched the movie Midway, they talk briefly about the Hornet. Had many deaths on there, kamikaze hits, the whole 9 yards. So it's got a lot of history behind it. And during the tour, not during the tour, but during the ghost investigation, and I had been on the Hornet twice, so this was the first time. It was a very small group of people. We were sitting in this space, and what I find interesting about this isn't so much the fact that we're hearing spirit box responses. What's interesting to me was that the spirit box was giving responses as the K2 meter was going off. Now, it's not the greatest video in the world. It was taken at night, pitch black. But I'd like to go ahead and play that, and then I'll give you my thoughts on that. So here we go. I'm going to be sleeping tonight. Right now, I think I'm down here by myself, but I'm going to be heading up. I'm on board the USS Hornet. It's the 18th of July, 2014, and looking forward to a ghost hunt tonight with some people. Very small group. Should be fun. And if there's anybody here on board that would like to talk with me tonight, please come forward and talk to me. I'm looking forward to speaking with you. Thanks. Up to the main deck here where we meet up with everybody else. So.
quite a dictionary of words, but there's also a phonetic mode, and I've played around with phonetics, and it's ended up saying meaningful things when it's theoretically impossible for that to happen. It's like the analogy would be the million monkey thing, where you're typing
Shakespeare.
Yeah, Shakespeare. So, can you tell us your name? Or maybe they... Oh, there's multiple spirits here?
Yes, we'll turn the lights on. Can you turn the lights?
Oh, you've got a reverend here, huh? Do you miss Heidi? Do you like... Video. Yes, I'm running video right now off my... Round again.
Maybe the same.
You've had me here before. That was short. We are getting some activity. Can you please give us a sermon?
$15 what? Can you talk?
Wow.
Do you see my voice recorder? Can you talk into that, please, for me?
So, not the greatest video, and I apologize for that, but you know, this was quite a while ago, 2014, well before I really understood how a lot of these things worked, and you know, maybe set the camera up. But what I find really interesting about this, about that particular video, two things. Number one, that some of the words that seemed to come through were relevant to the fact that I was on a vessel, right? The word chart came through, the word reverend came through. And what was interesting about that is that the area that we were in, although you couldn't tell because it was so dark, was the chapel. So coincidence, perhaps, but that particular device that reads dictionary words brought up words that seemed relevant. And then, of course, the K2 meter was going off at the same time as the machine or the device was giving out words. So how did that happen? Now, obviously, on the Hornet, there was a lot of electromagnetic interference. You could hear it. I mean, you talk about a buzzing place. Literally, that place was buzzing. And yet the device itself didn't maintain steady the entire time. So it wasn't picking up that background interference. And to keep in mind, we were also in an enclosed metal space, right? So where did this electromagnetic energy come from? Was it a natural source or was it paranormal? I don't know. It's a tough one. Now, the next thing I want to play is the electronic voice phenomena, EVP, that I captured at the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia. Now, let me set this up. It's not a very long piece. I'll play through it twice because you'll probably need to hear it twice. You're going to hear, it's going to sound silent for a couple seconds, but if you listen, there's something that's said, and then a recognizable voice will come in, a human voice, right? You can tell human. Then you're going to hear an enhanced part of the electronic voice phenomena. What's interesting about this in particular is I've spent a long time trying to figure out what this voice says, or whether or not it's even English. I don't know. It sounds like it's got a definite verbal cadence. It sounds like it has an intelligence behind it, but it's no words I've ever heard of, and I don't know what language it's in. So if you're watching this now or you're watching this in the future, if you ever want the original wave file so that you can listen to it on your computer and you can play it back and you can figure it out, reach out to me. I would be happy to share it because I really love to know what this is. And I even tried, playing it in reverse and things like that. Whatever this is, it's just totally strange. So basically, to set this up, I was with a few other folks. And again, this is just the audio piece. A few other folks, they were asking questions. And I only captured this on my digital recorder. I did not capture it on the video, which was separate, which is not part of this, but I did not capture it on the video. I only captured it on the digital recorder. So here we go. You ready?
Is that you changing the lights, or you make the noise too? You make it light up again?
So what the heck is that? All right, so I want to play that one more time, and I honestly, it still freaks me out every time I hear that because it sounds like it's a voice saying something. But what the heck is it saying? So again, when you see at the bottom it says EVP, you're going to hear how light that sounds or how distanced that sounds compared to the voice with the people with us. Now, one thing to keep in mind also is that there was only like 2 or 3 of us. There was nobody else in this area of the building. And Trans-Alleghenies, you can tell by this picture, is an enormous stone building, notoriously haunted, and I can see why. So here it goes again.
Is that you changing the lights, or you make the noise too? You make it light up again?
No idea. No idea to this day. And it's just one of those things, those anomalous things that you capture when you're doing ghost hunts and investigations and things like that. That you just can't explain. And I don't have an explanation for it, which begs the question, is it a ghost or is it not a ghost? I don't know. I don't know. Now, the thing is, with all the investigation I've ever done over the years, I've never, and I may have mentioned this earlier, I've never seen a ghost. I've captured the audio evidence. I've had feelings, which is not me. I'm not a sensitive kind of guy, although some folks might argue with that. But I'm generally not. And Christine writes, creepy. Yeah, it's absolutely creepy. The only time I've ever felt odd, like totally odd, like this isn't right, was on the Hornet, but not that first time when I captured that video there, but the second time when I was with, or had gone to a paranormal convention on board. And then we did a ghost hunt after. It was in the sick bay area. And, the story goes that when the ship was, during World War II was in battle and things like that, people were being brought into sick bay and dying right away. People were burned, all the horrible things you can think about war, that ship experienced and the people on board experienced it. And of course, there was a lot of death on board. But I was in the sick bay area, which basically was a whole bunch of beds, racks, right? Very similar to the beginning of the video that you saw on the Hornet one. And then the next space over was the doctor's space. And this was probably 2:00 in the morning. I was with somebody, so I wasn't alone. But as soon as I crossed the threshold into this area where people would have died, it was like stepping into a completely different environment, not physically so much as mentally. Something changed when I made that step into the other space. It was like everything I was feeling changed. And I really wish I could explain it better than that. I just don't have a really good explanation. But the only thing I can tell you is that it felt completely different. I changed environments, stepped into this space, which wasn't closed, with a door or anything like that. It just was connected. But I stepped across this threshold and boom, completely different feeling. Again, something I can't explain. And Christine, going back to what is your favorite device to use and why? Honestly, I think if you really want to get down to it, I think the best device is yourself. I think that if you keep yourself open to the possibility of things that are beyond your comprehension, I think you probably will be more than likely able to pick up things that you wouldn't normally pick up. And I know, Christine, you're super sensitive in that way. As a matter of fact, yeah, you're right. It was the same for me at the Winchester house. Yeah, Christine and I had visited in San Jose, the Winchester Mystery House, which if you've never gone, is just an amazing place to visit. I mean, just hundreds and hundreds of rooms, because the story goes that Sarah Winchester, who was the wife of the man who created the Winchester rifle, when her husband died, she got really big into seances and things like that. And the story goes that the spirits told her that if she ever stopped building on her mansion, she would die. So for her entire life, she built rooms and doors that went nowhere and staircases that went to the ceiling and just all kinds of crazy stuff. But the house is absolutely gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And Christine saw Sarah Winchester that day. Now, I did not, but she did. And that's not surprising, because the Winchester Mystery House is, again, purportedly haunted. So if you have that sensitivity, you're probably going to be more inclined to pick up on this stuff. And, and I've told this to Christine many times, there is fear involved with that. If I was overly sensitive to that and seeing, deceased folks, it would scare the bejesus out of me, I'm sure. But on the other hand, they're not going to hurt you. That's not what spirits do, despite everything that you see on TV. Why would people, or why would the deceased spirits of humans do that? I don't think they would. All right. So I'm going to close out with something very, very special. And this is something that I just came across only about an hour ago. I had forgotten that I had it, but I'm glad I found it. So my mother, Judith Cole, passed away in 2006. So she had, somehow contracted leukemia and went through the whole regimen of cancer treatments. Briefly went into recovery long enough for Christine and I to take her on this great trip to the Grand Canyon and things like that. And then, of course, in 2006, she contracted it again. She relapsed and she passed away. But prior to that, one day I sat down with her with a tape recorder, and, looking back over 20 years ago, I sat down with her with a tape recorder, and wouldn't you know it, the one thing I wanted her to do is tell me a ghost story. So 20 years ago, I was still interested in the paranormal, right? But she told me a ghost story, and I'd like to play that for you, and then we'll close out this evening. But yeah, this is a voice that I'm so glad that I captured, and I'm glad that I captured the story, because it's something that if I had never done, I never would have heard her voice again. So join me as we listen to Judith Cole tell us a ghost story.
No, tell me a story. Tell me about, tell me a ghost story, since that's what I seem to be keyed up on these days. Tell me a ghost story I've never heard. Not a fake one, but a real one.
A real ghost story?
Yeah.
About when I saw my grandpa?
That would be a good place
All right.
to start, because that was kind of spooky.
Okay, when my grandfather died, we lived at the Yellow House on the Old Lake Shore Road.
Mm-hmm.
And our bedrooms were down, my mother's, and we had me and Pat. We didn't have Gene and Ron then. We had me and Pat, and we shared a bedroom downstairs. And then when my grandfather died, as was customary then, people were often laid out at home instead of at the funeral parlor. And we had a nice living room because it had hardwood floors and a fireplace, a real wood-burning fireplace. And my father, I don't know what they did with the furniture, but they moved all the living room furniture out. And then it looked pretty because there were flowers on the mantelpiece. And then my grandfather's coffin was laid out in the living room.
And this was in the house, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the way people did it. And then people came calling at your house to see the deceased until the funeral came. And so then we kids, I don't know why, but me and Pat, we had to sleep up in the attic while Grandpa was laying down there. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's because we had someone else visiting for the funeral, or if Grandma was staying there maybe, in our bedroom. But up in our attic, half of it was attic, and we got to the top of the stairs. Half was attic, still rough with the beams, but with a floor. And the other half was, my father had made into a bedroom, sort of like this house was. Had a bedroom there. So Pat and I slept upstairs in this bedroom in a double bed during the time that Grandpa was downstairs. And then in the corner of the bedroom was a rocking chair that was like my grandpa used to sit in. It was one of them old-fashioned high-back wooden rocking chairs. And when we went to bed that night, the first night my grandpa was laid out in our house, and we were in bed, and I woke up and sitting and looking across the room at the rocking chair in the corner, I could see my grandpa sitting there in his nightshirt, like he used to wear at night, and he would sit at his own house in his nightshirt in the rocking chair before we go to bed, and like rock or something. Mm-hmm. And there he sat, and I could see him, and I woke Pat up, and she sat up. We both sat up, and I said, I can see Grandpa sitting in the chair. Do you see him? And then, of course, I scared her, and she'll tell you today that she doesn't remember this event at all, mm-hmm. let alone she didn't see anything. She doesn't remember it. And I sat up with her, and then I finally got enough courage to crawl out of bed and go to the door and open the door that went to downstairs and call my father to come up. Of course, then when he came up and put the light on, there was nothing there. It was just the rocking chair. Mm. But I could see my grandpa sitting there rocking real slow back and forth, and he'd sit with the arms and do this.
Was he looking at you?
I don't know. I couldn't see his face that clear, but I knew it was him.
Hmm. And when would this have been?
Let's see, when he died, and I don't know. I'd have to look at the family tree to see how old I was.
Okay.
I don't think I was no little child.
Mm-hmm.
I might have been as old as, I might have been between 9 and 15, somewhere in there.
Oh, that old. Well, okay.
Yeah.
9 and 15.
I don't really know how old I was right now, but I could check it, as I say, by going back and looking at what year he died.
And what was his name?
George.
George.
We called him Papa. It was George Hobbick. And maybe it was 1955 or so. Okay. So how old would I have been?
You would have been like 14,
15, but it still seems like I was younger than that at the time, to me. So I might be wrong on the date, but I'm saying 55. It might have been as early as 1950. See, without going and actually looking right now.
You don't have to look right now.
I don't know right offhand otherwise.
Why don't you know?
Because you don't have all these facts in your hand when you're doing this kind of thing.
Right.
And you have to go back and fill in the blanks and look it up. But I have to get the address for the yellow house, because that's another story there, all those houses on the old Lakeshore Road, how they were interconnected.
I don't know. If you ask me, that's a very creepy story. And it makes me wonder how many of you have stories very similar to that, because I think we all over time end up with stories things that we see or things that we hear that we just can't explain. And it's okay that we can't explain it, because it's really what makes life so interesting. Because if we knew everything, what fun would it be, right? We need things to investigate. We need to be able to question things. And I think that shows that we really don't know everything, and that's a good thing. So next week, I'm going to have, Christine writes, what a treasure to have. Yeah, I am to this day so thankful that I pulled out that recorder that day and decided to ask a couple questions. But yeah, thank you. But next week I'm going to have April Small on. I've had April on, almost a year ago. And we're going to see what she's been up to and what kind of artwork she's been doing. But for the rest of us, have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful and safe Halloween. Feel free to go out and grab all the candy you can, and try not to eat it all in one night, okay? But I will see you guys next week. And until then, keep being creative. Thank you so very much for joining me on the ARTalk podcast, where it's my goal to bring artists together to talk about their craft. If you'd like to join me for a conversation, please reach out via email at johncoleartist@gmail.com or by visiting my website at johnrobertcole.com. So until next time, keep crafting, painting, and inspiring others with your creativity. You make more of an impact than you know. See ya.